Had a chance to talk to Chris Godwin a little bit on Tuesday after he agreed to terms of his 3-year, $66 million deal, his second with the Bucs as a free agent. I got to tell you, Steve, man, the more I'm around Chris Godwin, the better I feel about life. I don't know why, but I remember this guy back in my day. It was about 8 years, or maybe almost going on 9 years ago. Godwin came to this league as a 20-year-old. I mean, gosh, he was really young, out of Penn State. And, at that time, Mike Evans took him under his wing, and those two guys had become, the fifth or sixth most prolific tandem of receivers in NFL history. But he's just good people. And I was a little, this was one of those things where you go in and you expect one thing. You're like, I've seen a Chris Godwin press conference after he signs a deal, right? I've seen a Chris Godwin press conference after he signs a deal when he still doesn't know how his ACL is going to heal up. Been there, done that. And it's remarkable that he's gotten 2 extensions after years in which he suffered, serious injuries to his legs, but they still signed him, to these big contracts. And so that's a testament, I think, to the Bucs, but also to just what they think about Chris Godwin. And it was an emotional look. Nobody cried except me, maybe, but it was kind of an emotional press conference where, he's up there, his wife Mariah's in front of him with their 2.5-month-old son, Ace, that's, in front there. And he just never says anything wrong, and the guy that surprised me a little bit was just how emotional Jason Light was, about all this. I mean, it was obvious in listening to Jason that he was extremely stressed about this signing. And I mean, they are, until you have a deal, you don't have a deal. And Jason's been down this road with a lot of players that he wanted back, Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield and Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tristan Wirfs and all this stuff. So, it's part of the business. You're always a little bit sketchy about what's going to happen. But man, Jason made it clear that, once this thing got done, just, what a huge relief it was for him. And yes, it got done with Chris Godwin leaving maybe as much as $30 million on the table that he could have gotten from the Patriots. And Jason Light addressed that, and frankly was sort of blown away by it. And Godwin said that, he admitted, he goes, look, 9 out of 10 players aren't going to make the decision I made, but I don't make decisions based on just money. And, for a guy in his business at that age, Steve, I mean, we saw it. We saw Myles Garrett demand a trade, said he never want to play it down for the Browns again, and then $40 million shows up under his pillow. He's like, no, I'm good. Right? Like, It was when guys say it's not about the money, it's usually about the money. For Chris Godwin, this was not about money.
No, it absolutely wasn't. And, whether he actually left $20 million on the table.
Who knows?
I mean,
right.
In non-guaranteed money, he probably did.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that would have been guaranteed? Well, we never know. But did he leave some on the table? Probably. Did Mike Evans probably leave money on the table? Yes, he did.
Yes, I think
when
so.
He signed here too. Did Baker Mayfield leave some money on the table?
Sure.
Most likely, yes. I mean, there is something to be said, and I never criticize a player for going to get the money.
No.
You have a short career, a short window. If you want to go get the most money, period. Yep. I don't begrudge you that.
No, I don't either.
But for some, there's a point where you go, I don't have to have that extra couple million. I'd rather be at a place I'm comfortable, that I want to live, the teammates I'm around, the organization I'm around. We've seen that a lot in Tampa. I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning have lots of players that could get a lot more money if they would have went to free agency elsewhere.
That's true.
Whether it's Kucherov or Vasilevsky or Steven Stamkos the first time around, Hedman, they could have all gotten more money elsewhere if they went to free agency. But they like it here. They like the organization. They like Tampa Bay. They like their teammates. They like their coaches. It's, et cetera. There is something to be said for that. And you've talked about too. Okay, so Chris Godwin, let's say, wants to live here, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
then okay, now I'm going to go play for New England. I got to go get a place up there. I got to travel back and
Oh,
forth
yeah.
if my wife wants to stay here, etc. It's not just I'm paid more there, go. Now for some people it is, and like I said, I wouldn't fault an athlete for doing that.
Right.
They don't get to work 40 years in their career
No.
and earn that money. They have a short window. They make a lot of it if they're good, but it's a short window. But for Chris, it absolutely was not purely about money.
Mm-mm.
I mean, you had to make an offer you would say yes to, of course.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, I think there's lots of athletes that aren't. Once you're in a place that you have success and you're comfortable and like to be at, if you're at a team that's perpetually bad, the Cleveland Browns, and yeah, Myles Garrett probably did want to leave, but $40 million, okay, I'll make it worth.
They had to overpay him to stay. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe somebody else gives him 40, but like that's essentially what teams like the Cleveland Browns have to do to keep guys.
Mm-hmm.
The
good organizations don't have to. You're still paying,
right? You don't have to overpay.
There can be some hometown discounts depending on the player.
No doubt. And he got one of those. I mean, he got one of those. And I thought it was interesting too, like, because you think about the history of this guy. The last time he went into a contract year, they're playing in December against the Saints, and Brady throws one over the middle. He takes a vicious hit, and boom, he's tore up his knee, including his ACL. And sort of that was that. And then the Bucs, despite him having those torn knee ligaments, decided, yeah, but we know he's going to do everything to get ready. Let's pay him. Let's pay him. We hope he makes it back for the opener. He did, by the way. Made it back against the Dallas Cowboys the next year. Even caught the first pass of the season. And I think he tweaked a hamstring or something after that, missed some games. But he had over 1,000 yards that year. Was he the same player? Probably not. He got better each year, I think, recuperating and recovering from that knee. I thought last year they made the mistake of moving him outside, I think in part because they wanted to preserve him a little bit and protect him with the boundary. That's not what he does. So he went back inside in the slot, and again, he was leading the NFL with 50, receptions. But one thing that Jason Light said that was interesting to me, because, Godwin did leave some money on the table and he could have gone somewhere else, and he didn't want to. His heart was here with Tampa Bay and his family's. But one thing he said was that, people always give us credit, meaning the Bucs. This is from Jason Light, of betting on Chris with his injuries, during his injuries. He said, but really, he and Mariah bet on us, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure we get it right for you and chase another ring. It's a good point. Like there were teams, and I don't know how many, or which ones necessarily. We hear about the Patriots, and they're not ready to win a Super Bowl just yet, I don't think. But there's a culture about this team. There's a fiber about this team. They have done a really good job of drafting guys that are not only just great players, but do things the right way. Really set the tone. Create the culture we're talking about. I think culture is winning. And then you could talk about culture, but there are certain things you have to do maybe before you win, and that's what guys like Mike Evans and Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. and Chris are all about. And I think it's huge. I think it does not get talked about enough on this football team. Now, let's see if these old guys can still play, right? Let's see if Levante David, at 35 can put up another 122 sack tackle season with 5.5 sacks. At some point, Father Time's going to win this. But keeping a band together when you have really good players is huge, but it's even bigger if they're the guys that are your core guys that these other young players that you draft in these next couple of weeks are going to come in and they're going to learn how to be a receiver, how to take notes, how to work your butt off, how to do extra work, and they're going to see Mike Evans do it. And that's really what's great about this football team and why I think they have a chance if they can get some more players on the defensive side. I think they have a chance to get back into the postseason and win a game or two. And if you do, you might find yourself 20 minutes from playing in a Super Bowl. But, no details, by the way, about where he is in his rehab, where he is in his injury. None of that stuff. I mean, he just said that, I'm on schedule, and if you ask me on where I'm supposed to be, it's different than the last injury, obviously, so he doesn't have anything to gauge it on. But he just said, um, I just think if you're too focused on the future, you're going to miss the opportunity you have right now. Each and every day, he tries to get 1% better, 1% better, and that's how he overcame it before. But man, like, it's impressive to listen to Chris Godwin. It just is. And you think about his impact on Jalen McMillan. The fact is, Steve, the entire offense from last season, including Ben Bredesen, obviously the running backs, the wide receivers, all of that whole offense that averaged, 29 and a half points a game, they're all back. And even though they have a new play caller, they're all in the same system. This could be a really, really fun year for the Bucs if you're into scoring points. I think this team can score a lot of points. And with Chris Godwin, if he makes it back, when he makes it back, to go with, Jalen McMillan and obviously Mike Evans and, Kate Otten at tight end, and you got the two running backs and that hulking offensive line, all five guys back, for another season. Things are looking up, man. It's arrow up, especially when you have unselfish guys like Chris.
Well, and let's not forget, too, with the offense, is that your hope is that the defense is going to be better.
Yeah, that was the goal, right?
That they're going to get the ball back for you quicker, or maybe create a turnover or two.
That would be nice.
Some short fields for the offense, which they didn't get much of last year.
No.
If they can improve that part of the defense. Like, the defense last year wasn't awful.
It was bendy,
it bent
but not
a lot.
great.
Yeah. Which that's okay.
Yeah.
But occasionally you got to get the ball back for your offense.
Yeah, you do.
Occasionally you got to get off the field so you don't tire your defense out. Like, that's
right.
That's where they had issues, is late in games. I think their defense was gassed a lot.
I do too.
Been on the field too much. They couldn't get off the field. They didn't give up a ton of points, but a lot of plays, a lot of yards. For instance, that Kansas City game, which they were able to tie up, I would have absolutely gone for two, because your defense, there was no way. They were done. Like, you can see that in games. And so if they can improve that, if Hassan Reddick can help improve the pass rush, and they can figure out how to turn the ball over a little bit, or just create some more 3-and-outs, like, the offense should be even more potent.
Well, I think so. I think a lot of it will depend on how long and how well their older guys can play. What does Mike Evans have in the tank? What is Chris Godwin going to come back with? McMillan has improved dramatically, but I don't think he's going to carry this offense by himself. So they're going to have to make sure they're healthy and all of that. And if they do, one other little carrot to this thing, and I don't think it's insignificant, because, look, these guys all talk, right? Whether they're talking to Jason Light or the agent once in a while, as teammates, they definitely talk. And I don't know that this was the focus, and certainly not the reason. But the fact of the matter is that, the two best receivers in club history, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they're now put themselves in the company of the greatest tandem of NFL receivers on a team in the league ever. And so, I mean, currently they rank 5th in combined yards, which is like 16,372. But guess who they're behind? The Rams, Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. The Niners, Jerry Rice and John Taylor, which could be Jerry Rice and anybody.
Yep.
And the Dolphins,
Mark Clayton.
Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. And the Colts, Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. And I think they could take down the last two group pairings I mentioned by the end of this year. It's not unreachable that they finish their careers as the most prolific receiving duo in NFL history in terms of, receiving yards and things like that. It's remarkable that they've been able to do this. And, they talked about it, and Godwin said, it's rare to have two guys that operate the way we do, with the abilities we have to be on the same team for so long. It's just something I'm proud of. And he feels, fortunate to be a part of it with Mike. You can bet that Mike weighed in on this because he's been through a similar situation a year ago and also stayed. So yeah, this is a feel good moment for a really good player with absolutely no prediction of when he's going to be prepared to play again. But when he is, I think he'll be very, very good.
I almost wonder if some of those conversations with Evans and Godwin didn't take place last year
Sure, because Mike
about
was a
Evans
free
saying,
agent.
"Hey, I'm going to come back, and
Yeah.
will you come back too?" Like, I mean, we know they're close. We know, they have a good relationship with each other, and
Oh
then you
yeah.
add Baker in the mix too, and like some of those discussions may have happened last year. Even now, you didn't know that an injury was going to happen, and yeah, the team obviously has to want you back as well, but
Yeah.
but those conversations may have, hey, let's try to keep this band together and into next season too. And it may have happened before this past season.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, man. I mean, you're talking about, this is Batman and Robin, right?
Hmm.
It's Batman and Robin, and you know, they rely on each other um, in meeting rooms and on the practice field, certainly in the games, to take heat and this and that. Chris has always been a higher volume catch guy. I think Mike's been a bigger play guy at
Hmm.
times.
Hmm.
But man, they make a hell of a tandem. They really do. And I think it's great that they're back. Now, they're not done. The Bucs aren't done. They made some moves on free agency, one with one of their own players and another one for a punter. We'll explain that in just a second. But first, get on down to Breitling Boutique, man. It's in International Plaza Mall, my favorite mall to go to. It's got terrific stores, including Breitling Boutique, which is upstairs near the center of the mall. You want to see some of the greatest Swiss watches in the world. They've been in business, the Breitling company has, for over 144 years. This group at International Plaza Mall has been there for about 5, but you talk about customer service, it's second to none. You're going to walk in there, you're going to enjoy the store, have a drink, learn about the various watches they have. As I mentioned, the chronomats, the Navitimers, watches for your wife or girlfriend, sports watches, all kinds of colors for the wristbands and whatnot. But they've also been doing this thing with, if you're an NFL fan, this is a must. They've had a limited edition of these chronomat watches that are now team watches converted into that. All 32 NFL teams represented while supplies last. You're talking about the team logo. You're talking about the color on the face of the watch. Absolutely stunning. I know the Bucs one, I think, has been on our website on tampabay.com before, but hey, get on down there to Breitling Boutique. Again, it's an International Plaza Mall upstairs near the center of the mall. Breitling Boutique, and make sure you let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, the Bucs weren't done with free agency at the very least. They also brought back one of their own, an outside linebacker, pass rusher, Anthony Nelson, who really made the biggest play of the year last year against Carolina. Carolina is going to win that game. They're going to kick an easy field goal. And then somehow Nelson managed to strip Chuba Hubbard, and, the Bucs went down, able to score and win the game. But what was memorable about that, and I wrote about it in the Tampa Bay Times on tampabay.com, is that Nelson nearly didn't make the game. I mean, he didn't. He had his wife had their baby, Eli, like on Thursday. He got no sleep Friday. Had to get on a plane, go play, and when he got back home, as fate would have it, it was very, very late, after 1 o'clock. He got home, and those 2 a.m. feedings happened and whatever, and his little son was awake for him as if he was going to give him a hero's welcome, because that was such a huge play. I mean, I remember just going, wow, like if they lose that game now, Carolina wound up beating Atlanta and that sort of thing, but man, that race would have gone almost too tight at that point. And what a play that he made. So he's back, and in the last 4 years, I think he has 17 sacks, something like that. He gets a 2-year deal worth $10 million, and it could be worth as much as $12 million. So I think that's a good signing when you place him, along with Hassan Reddick, and of course, you've got a lot of the old guys back, coming off the edge with Yaya Diaby and company. So just Mr. Reliable, man. He plays less than 40% of the snaps, but he's a high volume, big play dude that they really, really wanted back. The other move the Bucs made on Tuesday was they shored up their punting situation. They signed or are going to sign, reach an agreement with Broncos punter Riley Dixon. And it's funny because if you go back, it was a funny moment. You go back to the NFL Combine, and we're talking to Todd Bowles, and people are firing off questions about, your defense and got a pass rush, and what are you going to do at corner, and this, that, and the other. Somebody says, "Hey, what can you say about what you're looking for in a punter?" And Bowles says, "Not shanking them." And he's like, "It's one of the few positions." He goes, "It's cut and dried. You either have to, you know." You don't talk about it much. He either goes out there and he does it or he doesn't. And he goes, so in my mind, that's really major for me. Just don't shank the ball. The Bucs were last in punting, last, and you can't be last in a lot of things. Punting is one of them. It just kills your field position. They went through 3 punters last year. It was sort of painful to watch. Jake Camarda, who they drafted several years ago, I think in the 4th round out of Georgia. He had been great, man. He had been great. He finished his rookie year 48.8 average, had a 74-yard punt that year, which tied the club record. The next season, he topped it. He averaged 50.1 yards, and then he got the yips. I can't explain it. Specialists, you'll see it on golf courses. He just didn't hit the ball right. It just didn't get enough of it, and consequently, his average fell. Not submarined, but he was at 45.3. They brought in Trenton Gill. He kicked for a while. He was 43.3. And then they finished up with, I think, Jack Browning, and he was 42.5. So they're going the wrong way. They averaged 43.7 yards, which was the worst in the NFL. And they also had the worst net of 38.2 because they gave up a lot of touchbacks. And that's something Dixon doesn't do. So I think he'll help him. He's an experienced guy. He's been around forever. And people go, well, he's kicking in the altitude. I think his average was the same, or if not better, when he did not kick at altitude for whatever reason. So there's not much correlation there. It's just good for them to try to shore up the punting situation. They were at where they on punting where they were at on place kicking for many, many years, just kind of wandering through the darkness until they finally discovered Chase McLaughlin. But you think about the guys that came through here as place kickers, and now you run afoul of the punter. It's tough. You got to make sure you get a guy that you have faith in. And it doesn't matter, you don't want him to kick it in the end zone every time for touchbacks. You want him to give your gunners and some of your defenders a chance to get down the field and make tackles. So there's an art to it. But I think the one thing they're confident is that this guy's been around. He's done it. He did as recently as last year, was a good punter. And so Riley Dixon is now one of your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a great night for your Tampa Bay Lightning. However, they go up to Carolina. First of a couple games on this road trip. I guess they lose 4-1. They got down, I think it was 2-0 in the second, or maybe they gave up the third goal before the third. All of a sudden it was 2-0, then it was 3-0, and then they lose 4-1. But I don't know. Did they play poorly? I didn't get to see the game. I don't know what the analysis.
The first period, they came out pretty well. The first period, 30 shot attempts, missed a lot of the net, which that's not good. Yeah. I think 13 missed shots in that period. And then you add the blocks in and such. But I thought the first period was pretty good. They gave up a shorthanded goal at the very end of a power play. A power play they had several chances to score on, just couldn't bury it.
Yeah, that hurts.
The second goal, really didn't like what Vazzy gave up. It kind of went off his stick as he was hugging the post and wasn't hugging it enough to give that goal up. I didn't think it was a. I thought the first period was pretty good. I think they didn't maintain that throughout the rest.
Yeah.
It's 2 straight losses now, maybe 3 straight games. You go, I'm not thrilled about how they performed. Now Thursday night they were able to get the win 6-5.
Right.
So now it's 2 straight losses, and they're still have 2 more games on this road trip. Then they'll be at home Monday night for a game, and then they're back on the road for 3 more. So 18 games left in the season, still in a good spot as far as playoffs and all that go. But you've got a chance to catch Florida and Toronto for first place in the division. And not that the Lightning care where they finish so much. and they've shown that through the years. Like, you just get in. But if you finish first in the division, your first round opponents are not Toronto and not Florida.
Yeah, that's the key. That's the big key.
Yeah. Your opponent's going to be Columbus or Detroit or Ottawa or Boston or the Islanders or the Rangers. It's going to be one of those teams,
right,
instead of Florida or Toronto. If you finish second or third in the division, you're getting one of Florida or Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on which one finishes first and which one finishes second and third. So,
yeah,
I don't think the Lightning really care where they finish, but if you really want to play the matchups, finishing first this year is not a bad thing.
No.
You would avoid one of those matchups. Not that those teams can't beat you, because in hockey history that happens all the time, including the Lightning back in 2019 when they were the number 1 seed and got beat by Columbus as the 8th seed. So
right. But if you advance, you know, that's the key.
Yeah. Now the bigger concern from Tuesday night is Nikita Kucherov did not play the third period. Now, he left practice on Monday. I didn't see Ned reported that he left practice a little gingerly. It looked like he was shaking his hand.
But there wasn't a moment in this game that you could tell that
I didn't see one, but I didn't go back. I mean, he last played the shift like a minute to go in the second period, so
it was pretty early.
Period. Yep. Hedman, who missed Saturday's game, played on Tuesday, so that was good to get him back.
Yeah.
But no update from John Cooper on Nikita Kucherov after the game.
Yeah, you just got to have him. Got to have Cooch, and he does so much for you. Yep. Scores, assists, power play. I mean, you name it, man. He's clutch. So we'll have a chance this morning, as I mentioned, to talk to Ben Breitling, who also re-signed with your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their left guard, who chooses to forego free agency for a chance to have a little longer-term future here. So that'll be something.
I think that's an underrated signing. We talked about this last night.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
Just how good he was, and he wasn't even supposed to be the starter last year. I mean, could have been Robert Hainsey. Opeta was probably going to be the starter at one point.
That's
and then,
right.
He gets hurt, and Breitling steps in. But and not that he's the best guard in the NFL. I'm not saying that at all. But the continuity of having that offensive line stay together for next year, and bring back all 11 starters on offense.
That I was going to say. How about that? How about all 11 guys from an offense that averaged 29.5?
Yep.
Are coming back under the same scheme, different coordinator, different play caller. Not going to minimize that.
Yep.
But for the first time in a very long time, and for Baker Mayfield, a very, very long time, to have the same offensive terminology, to have the same scheme, to think where you can start in the offseason to get better, that's just big because you're not having to learn all that stuff. I mean, it's huge.
And it was a top 5 offense last year, and there's no doubt you watched going, they could have been better.
They could have. They left a lot of points, and they had injuries. Mike missed 3 games.
Yep.
And of course Chris wound up missing 10, I think. And so, the two of them were actually out for 3 games.
Yep. And then you add in the number of fumbles Baker Mayfield had.
Oh God.
And too many interceptions as well. And then the running game got off to a slow start.
Mm-hmm.
It took Liam Cohen a while to figure out, how to use Rashad White. And then
inside zone runner,
and then how to get Bucky Irving. And I think, you've talked about this, but I think going into the season, they thought Bucky Irving was one type of running back.
Yeah, he turned out not to be.
They were misusing him because they thought that, and it turns out he was better at running up the middle and running inside runs. And
he was inside zones.
They didn't anticipate that, and that's not what they were expecting out of him, and probably miscoached or miscalled some plays early in the season. But they figured that out, which is what good teams and good coaches and good offenses do is, okay, this isn't working. Let's figure something else out. And, when everyone was complaining he wasn't the starter for a while, I think it was because they didn't know how to use him yet.
Yeah, they didn't. They discovered that as much as anything, and they tried him outside, and he just, every time they put him in the game, he'd do something to crease the middle of the field, and then he was gone. And so, terrific find, terrific year for him, man. I mean, gosh. But yeah, having the entire offense, the entire offense coming back that average what they did, there won't be many excuses. Jalen McMillan's going to be so much better. You got so much more out of Cade Otton when those guys went down. They went 0-3, when Mike was out. But boy, did they gain a lot of experience. And
I
look,
think Kate Otten that may have
breakout.
been the biggest takeaway from last year's team was that when Mike and Chris were both down, how he was able to step up.
Incredible. Runs after the catch, physical, combat catches, high volume, 100-yard games, like everything you'd want to see that you hadn't really seen on a consistent basis. Kate Otten provided it. He did. So guys got better. And the younger guys are coming back with more experience, and the older guys have the experience if they can get healthy. It's going to be fun. Get your mailbag questions in. We'll have time for those at Sports Day Tampa Bay on Twitter if you want.
By the way, did any other groups come forward looking to buy the Rays?
Well, there's about one every 7 minutes. I
was thinking of starting a group too if Stu's up for charity.
Yeah. I was having this conversation on the way home from dinner. Happy birthday to my wife belatedly. But
happy birthday, Val.
Yeah, she. I was thinking about this. It's like there's a lot of groups, and I think that Sternberg's gonna have to pick one at some point. I don't know when he will get around to it. But you're not going to get any clarity to this thing until there's a deadline, right? Until artificial or not. Until Major League Baseball says you got to make a decision, Stu. We have to know, Stu, or the St. Petersburg deal is sort of in limbo or might go away. Like you need a little bit of leverage on this, and I just feel like and John Romano wrote a good column about this in the Tampa Bay Times on TampaBay.com, and he equated it. He's kind of analogous to, there was a time when Evan Longoria did everything right, and he Rookie of the Year, gave him credibility, got him to a ALCS championship, all of that. But like, you got him into World Series actually. And here's the thing: there came a time when he had to go. And it wasn't anything he did wrong necessarily. Now in this case, you could say maybe Stu's doing some things wrong, but his point was for the good of the franchise, like you would have with a player, for all that you poured into this club, and unquestionably is the biggest reason, because of the people you hired after you bought it from Vince Naoli, you're probably the single best reason why the Rays have had the success they've had, because you saw to it to run a better ship than Vince Naoli, and you brought in the right guys, analytics or otherwise, to have a low payroll team that was competitive every single year and went further than most teams could ever fathom. So that goes in Stu's resume. That's part of his history here. But if you're going to do the right thing, which isn't always easy, much like with a player, you got to move on. It's time to move on. Otherwise, you're hurting the franchise if you don't at this point. I just don't know how this debate can be healthy for anybody, and it's not going to accomplish anything to boot. So it was a good column. I can't do it justice just telling you what the sentiment was, but read it in the Tampa Bay Times on TampaBay.com with John Romano. Also, get down to Breitling Boutique, man. Go see our folks there. Take a look at the watches that they have. Some of the greatest in the world, celebrating the NFL's 104th year anniversary. All 32 teams represented while they last. They also have women's sports watches. She's going to enjoy that for your wife or your girlfriend. Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Make sure you let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. Thanks for listening. I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.